Everybody, just a reminder, the music you're hearing behind me is Stream Beats. It is copyright-free music for your live streams and your straight to YouTube, TikTok produced videos. You won't get any copyright strikes when you use Stream Beats in your content that you are creating. And speaking of the background music, we're going to go ahead and turn that down a little bit, because the countdown is getting close to the point where we're about ready to start the show. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome everybody to Monster Monday for July 26, 2021. I'm your host, DM Galabond, and tonight on Monster Monday, we are going to be looking at the history of the Purple Worm. The Purple Worm, a surprisingly diverse monster, especially when you consider the sort of variants and related versions of this monster throughout the history of D&D, which gives us a clue in 5e how we can go about reskinning the monster. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about placement of this monster in your campaigns, where it's appropriate, and then some tactics for using it as a DM, and also tactics if you happen to be in an adventuring party and you run into one of these monsters. And yes, a purple worm really is, in every sense of the word, a monster. And when we look at reskinning, I'm even going to show you a case study where I have actually reskinned a purple worm as something else in my 5th edition Planeswalking game that I run on Sunday afternoons. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this show. All right. As always, images for our artwork comes straight out of the Wizards of the Coast and TSR product books. This is a 2nd edition Purple Worm from the 2nd edition Monstrous Manual. And when we talk about the description of the monster, we work from the earliest to the most recent, and then when we look at the lore, we go from the most recent to the earlier. So, description of the purple worm. Purple worms are huge slime-covered creatures over 100 feet long and 8 to 10 feet in diameter. That's what we learn from the basic edition of D&D. Because yes, this monster goes all the way back to the original edition of the game. Now, interesting thing, in 1st and 2nd edition, they didn't provide a description of the monster, so we have to skip forward all the way to 3rd edition to find the next description of the monster. It says, this creature looks like a massive worm covered with plates of dark purple, chitinous armor. Its toothy maw is as wide as a human is tall, and that's from 3rd edition. And then from 4th edition, we learn purple worms are enormous burrowing predators that eat anything living or dead. So, yeah, it's pretty much just a carnivore, scavenger, you name it, it'll eat it. All right, now, thinking about the lore of purple worms, and this is a purple worm image from D&D Beyond, so this is the concept of what they look like in the current edition of the game, 5e. Boons of the worm. When a purple worm burrows through the ground, it consumes earth and rock, which it breaks down and constantly excretes. Precious metals and gems can thus be found within the bodies of purple worms, which are targeted by particularly brave and foolhardy treasure hunters. So, yes, if you are a party of sufficient level and you're daring enough, yeah, go out hunting a purple worm and see if you can get a payday by slicing the thing open after you kill it and seeing what is in its gullet. So, from 4th edition, we learned that a purple worm can burrow through solid rock, leaving tunnels in its wake. The purple worm eats anything and relies on its blind sight and tremor sense to detect prey. And then from 3rd edition, purple worms are feared for swallowing their prey whole. entire groups of adventurers have vanished down their gullets, one member after the other. So, yes, the purple worm is a. Hey, Yamish, welcome. Glad you could make it tonight. Uh, Purple worms are predators that can swallow you whole. And as we're going to look at, when we look at the variants of this, I really kind of looked for monsters that not only the description says they're similar to purple worms, but also large burrowing worm-like monsters that can swallow medium-sized creatures whole. And because when you're talking about reskinning a monster, I think that is important to kind of keep all those things in mind. All right, now this is a picture of the purple worm from the 3rd edition monster manual. So you can see the idea of how they look from edition to edition varies greatly. So it's a monstrosity. And the monstrosity, as we've seen in a lot of these other Monster Mondays, that just simply means that they don't know what other category to throw it into. It doesn't exactly match up with dragons or with snake-like people or with this or with that or with aberrations that are from outer planes or undead or whatever. So it just becomes a monstrosity. And bada bing, bada boom. That's where we go. Now we come to the part of the show where we go and dig into the mechanical features of the worm throughout the various editions of the game. We will get back to talking about the variations of the purple worm throughout the edition. All right. Now, as you'll notice, going back to the rules cyclopedia for original D&D, we're not even looking initially at the purple worm. We are looking at a variant of the purple worm called a Nightcrawler. Now, the Nightcrawler in this edition doesn't really give us a whole lot of information, but we are going to see in later editions when we come back to the Nightcrawler, we get a really cool reskinning idea when it comes to the purple worm. For here, it says this appears similar to a purple worm, 100 feet long and 10 to 15 feet wide, but it's black in color. And it surprises 50% of the time if it tunnels up under an opponent, and it swallows its opponent if attack rolls a 19 or 20. And a victim swallowed loses 1 level per round due to energy drain, no saving throw. However, it does not affect anyone protected by a protection from evil spell. So bites inflict 2d10 points of damage, plus the usual saving throw versus poison, and the tail stinger inflicts 2d4 points. Requires saving throw against poison, and also has a 1 in 8 or 25 or 12.5% chance of killing the victim immediately. No saving throw, no adjustments. Roll a 1d8, and on 1, the victim is dead. Okay, so then in the same source, the Rules Cyclopedia, we look at the purple worm. And the purple worm is a 15 hit die monster. It is, again, 100 feet long, 8 to 10 feet in diameter. They tunnel through the earth. They attack by biting and stinging with their tails. If the attack roll for the bite is 4 or more greater than the number required, or a 20 in any case, they can swallow creatures man-sized or smaller whole. And they swallowed victims take 3d6 points of damage each round thereafter. A victim stung by the tail must make a saving throw versus poison or die. It's just save versus poison or you die. That's it. Note the purple worms are encountered underground. Size of underground tunnels may prevent the creature from using one of its attacks. If it approaches by tunneling, it may surprise the victim, 25% chance, but 1d4 plus 1 rounds will pass before its tail is dragged free of the burrow. So that's just to say, all right, if you're burrowing, Ms. DM, don't have it use its tail attack because the tail ain't there the same round that the mouth is there. Okay, so now we go to first edition or AD&D, and we get our first picture of the purple worm. And again, it's armor class 6, 15 hit die, 2d12 bite damage, 2d4 stinging damage. Now here it says the size is 50 feet long. So they've kind of shrunk a little bit from the old edition from the original D&D to first edition. And purple worm attacks by biting. Any hit 20%, okay, or 100% die roll of 20, and indicates it's engulfed the victim. Poisonous stinger in its tail. Weapon is only used in rear defense or if the worm is fighting large or numerous opponents in a very spacious area. And it causes 2d8 or 2d4 hit points of damage when it hits, and the victim fails a saving throw. It's killed by the worm's poison. And then a mottled worm is an aquatic variety of the purple worm. Okay, so it lives in the shallow muck at the bottom of large bodies of water. So that's yet another variant there. But otherwise, mechanically, it's the same. Now we get one of the related creatures. And this is a creature that initially I was expecting to come up in the research as being related to the purple worm, but it didn't. And I think the reason that the editors of D&D don't always think of these two things as related is because the worms are, of course, worms that crawl on their bellies, and the Remorhaz is a creature that crawls on its legs, more like a centipede. But the Remorhaz, also known as a polar worm, inhabits chill wastes. They're aggressive predators. Now, the size of these things varies greatly. In later editions, they can get to rival the size of purple worms. In this edition, they're a bit smaller, about 24 feet in length, but they will they have that same ability to swallow you whole, and they burrow through Arctic conditions. But the strange thing, well, one of the strange things about it is that it has a body that is so hot you take heat damage from touching it, and it has these little bat wing things near on its neck that help to raise the front part of it off of the ground. And also the Remorhaz is a creature that is hunted by frost giants for its eggs. Not because they like to eat the Remorhaz eggs, but because they like to raise the Remorhaz from the egg and use it as a guardian of their treasure. So very much, very interesting sort of creature here. But again, it's so large that it can go ahead and it can swallow swallow somebody whole. Now notice that any victim swallowed in this way is instantly killed due to the intense heat in the monster's digestive system. So you don't get saving throws against it. If you get swallowed, you're just dead. So again, this is pointing out that in the old editions, life was cheap, and don't get too attached to your character because it can, there are many, many ways for it to die. Right. The Remorhaz typically has ice blue coloration everywhere except along its back, where a streak of white sets off the large protrusions. And it has multifaceted white eyes. Now, another creature that used to appear in old editions of D&D, but really doesn't appear anymore, is something called the Thunderherder. Now, The Thunderherder is a distant cousin of the purple worm, but they're non-aggressive. They travel in vast herds just a few feet under the ground, inoffensive, and of sizes ranging from 3 to 5 feet wide and 5 to 10 feet long, found in desert regions. And so, the main dangers from Thunderherders are the incidental earth tremors and terrible trumpeting they create as they stampede underground. And so that would be a really interesting thing, a way to reskin something as a Thunderherder and use it against a low-level party to frighten them that they're about to get attacked by a purple worm. And certainly maybe would do something to like spook all the horses, spook all the mounts, and have all the pack mules and the pack horses go, break free of their tie downs and run off, and then everybody has to run out of the camp to try to find them. So that could be an entertaining thing as a DM if you wanted to do that and spice up a travel montage for your party. Maybe give them a skills challenge to go and find all of the mounts as they after they've been spooked by the Thunderherders or the Thunderherder herd that just went by. All right, so now as we move to second edition, we're going to look at the Remorhaz once again, and they are chill Arctic wastes, segmented body with a winged head and neck, and they're from 21 to 24 feet long, or actually 21 to 42 feet long, and they can swallow creatures whole. And again, any victim swallowed is killed instantly by the intense heat inside the creature. And when the Remorhaz is aroused, it secretes a substance that causes its intestines to become very hot, and its back protrusions actually glow cherry red from excess heat. Non-magical weapons melt on contact with its back, and any creature touched by the surface suffers 10d10 points of heat damage. So, yeah, they are extremely nasty creatures. All right. Then we have the Purple Worm out of 2nd edition. And armor class 6, 15 hit dice, gargantuan. Now notice here in 2nd edition, it's continued to shrink because now the Purple Worm is 25 feet long. Not the 100 feet long, but they still have the sting. And they still have, they're still capable of swallowing people whole. Okay, swallow creature dies in 6 rounds, is digested in 2 hours, and cannot be raised from the dead. Okay, anyone trapped inside a purple worm may attempt to cut their way out. The interior is AC 9, but digestive juices weaken the victim, causing a cumulative -1 penalty to the damage the victim can cause. And then the stinger deals 2d4 points of poison damage, and you make a successful save versus poison, or you're instantly slain. And then we have the mottled worm, which is the aquatic variant, and the Thunderherder once again, like we saw, and that will travel in the desert. Okay, now all in 3rd edition, when we move to 3rd edition, we get yet a new variant in here, which, as far as I can tell, only appears in 3rd edition, or I should say, among the source books that I have, this only appears in 3rd edition. I don't have any source books whether it appeared in earlier editions or in 4th or 5th edition. So this is the Frostworm. And the Frostworm lives in cold plains, and it has a cold breath weapon as well as a trill breath weapon. It is a gargantuan monster, and it again can swallow people whole. So here you go. And here's your little adventure, and here's the frostworm coming after him. And so while the Remorhaz lives in the same climate and has a hot body, this lives in that Arctic environment and has an extremely cold body. And then, of course, it says that the Remorhaz and frostworms hate each other and they attack each other on sight. So that could be an interesting type of thing for a party to witness if those two things went at it. Now, the trill, it emits a noise that forces its prey to stand motionless. Sonic mind-affecting compulsion affects all creatures other than frostworms within a 100-foot radius. DC 17 will save or be stunned for as long as the worm trills, and for 1d4 rounds thereafter. And then the frostworm's body generates intense cold, and opponents take an extra 1d8 points of damage every time the creature succeeds on a bite attack. And then the breath weapon, 30-foot cone once per hour, damage 15d6 cold damage, reflex 22 to save for half damage. And opponents held motionless by the trill get no saving throw. And then when it's killed, a frostworm turns to ice and shatters an explosion that deals 12d6 points of cold damage and 8d6 points of piercing damage to everything within 100 feet. Now, once again, these are things that you can think of for reskinning options. When you are looking at what you may want to do with your purple worm, how you may want to present that as something other than the garden variety of purple worm. Well, going back and making it a frostworm and then giving it this explosion thing on death where it deals extra damage, that can just be really nasty to do to your party. All right, so then we have the Nightcrawler. Now, we saw the Nightcrawler way back in the early editions, and it really didn't specify because they weren't as good about specifying it. But here in 3rd edition, we learned that Nightcrawler is actually an undead. An undead from the Shadowfell. So maybe you want to think about reskinning your purple worm as an undead purple worm. Boy, howdy, wouldn't that put the fear of Asmodeus into your PCs. So, a gargantuan undead, the size of a purple worm. It has a desiccating aura, energy drain, spell-like abilities, poison. It can summon undead, and it can swallow people whole. It's native to the plane of shadow. Challenge rating 18. Okay, so energy drain. Living creatures inside a Nightcrawler's gizzard gain 1 negative level each round. Okay, that's kind of dumb. So that means if you're an 8th level character and you get swallowed, first round you're a 7th level character. Next round you're a 6th level character. Next round you're a 5th level character, so on, so on, so on. So it should say you lose a level every round. Improved grab. The Nightcrawler must hit with its bite attack, then attempt to start a grapple as a free action without provoking an attack of opportunity. Poison. The injury, you have to do a DC 22 save, and the damage is 2d6 strength damage from the poison. So the spell-like abilities, at will, it can do Contagion, Deeper Darkness, Detect Magic, Greater Dispel Magic, Haste, Invisibility, See Invisibility, Unholy Blight. 3 times a day it can do Cone of Cold, Confusion, Hold Monster, and once a day, Finger of Death, Mass Hold Monster, and Plane Shift. It can also summon undead. Once per night, 9 to 16 shadows, 3 to 6 greater shadows, or 2d4 dread wraiths. The undead arrive in 1d10 rounds and serve for 1 hour or until released. And then it can, of course, swallow you whole, which is why it makes this particular list. So, what would you think about facing a purple worm that was undead and could do all of that? You probably would think that your DM just really hates you and wants to end the game. All right, that's literally probably more terrifying than going up against a Tarrasque with all the crap it can do. Okay, Remorhaz, huge magical beast. Once again, this is our worm-like, caterpillar-like critter from the Arctic that has a heated body and deals damage. So it can swallow people whole. So when a Remorhaz begins its turn with a grappled opponent in its mouth, it can swallow that opponent with a successful grapple check. Now you don't immediately die, but when you're inside the Remorhaz, you take 2d8 plus 12 points of bludgeoning damage and 8d6 points of fire damage every round from being in its gizzard. Swallow creature can cut its way out using a light slashing or piercing weapon to deal 25 points of damage to the gizzard, which is AC 15. Once the creature exits, muscular action closes the hole. Another swallowed opponent must cut its own way out. And then a huge Remorhaz's interior can hold 2 large, 4 medium, 8 small, 32 tiny, 128 diminutive, or 512 fine or smaller opponents. Now, those are all the size categories you had back in 3rd edition. So anything touching its body takes 8d6 points of fire damage, and creatures striking Remorhaz with natural attacks or unarmed attacks are subject to this damage. The heat can melt or char weapons. Any weapon that strikes a Remorhaz is allowed a DC 18 Fortitude save to avoid destruction. All right, and then we finally get to the star of our show, the Purple Worm. And the Purple Worm gets all of the things you'd expect. It's got its grab, its poison, its ability to swallow whole. So the poison is a DC 25. The initial damage is 1d6 strength damage. The secondary damage, so if you fail it a second time, then you take 2d6 additional strength damage. So this thing can just simply kill you by draining all your strength, basically, with its poison. Purple Worm can try to swallow a grabbed opponent, and it takes only 8 acid damage, and the 2d8 plus 12 points of crushing damage from being in its gizzard. And it has a, so it can swim. In this edition, they can swim. So I didn't see the mottled worm here, so it's probably just basically reskin it and give it a swim speed equal to its burrowing speed, probably. Now in 3rd edition, we come to one of my favorite variations on the Purple Worm, which is the Thunder Worm. Everybody cue up the AC/DC music here. Okay, so the Thunder Worm is a colossal, incorporeal, magical beast that has an AC of 23 and 696 hit points, and it burrows through the clouds because it flies. So thunderworms are sometimes called living storms, for they float about in clouds, their bodies course with electrical and sonic energy. So this would be a perfect thing to throw at your party as they are having a nice leisurely trip by airship down the coast of the Forgotten Realms. And they see a storm off over there, and they think, "Oh, that storm's not gonna get close enough." But then part of that storm comes out of the cloud and begins snaking its way across the sky. And in horror, the captain of the ship realizes it's a thunderworm. So it it has electricity damage, sonic damage, and its its attack. Wow. Its attack is an incorporeal touch plus 46 on its melee attack. So you're probably not going to be able to avoid getting hit by this thing if it targets you. So you get engulfed. It can position itself to occupy the same space as its enemies. Fate potentially far worse than being swallowed by a purple worm. It affects as many creatures as will fit within the cloud worms facing a 40-foot cube. Target creatures must make a successful reflex save or take electricity and sonic damage as if hit by the cloud worm's incorporeal touch attack. The thunderclap, creatures within 30 feet make a reflex save or take 24d8 points of sonic damage. After producing a thunderclap, it must wait 1d4 rounds before doing it again. Defensive shock. Opponent that uses metal weapon or natural weapon to deal damage will take 2d6 points of electricity damage. So yeah, and it's incorporeal, so it can be harmed only by other incorporeal creatures, +1 or better magic weapons, spells, spell-like abilities, and supernatural abilities. So it has a 50% chance to ignore any damage from a corporeal source except for force effects or attacks made with ghost touch weapons. So yeah, very, very, very nasty variation on the purple worm. Something that would be really fun to use if you were thinking about, let's say, an air elemental version of a purple worm. This would be a good template to go off of, the Thunderworm. Now, you'd have to tune it to make sure it's not overkill, because something with 696 hit points, that's going to be... okay, it's challenge rating 21. 696 hit points, just to give you an idea. I believe that's the same number of hit points Tiamat has, who is a challenge rating 25 in 5th edition. So the mechanics would need to be tuned a little bit to make this something that a tier 4 party would not just utterly get annihilated by. Now we come to 4th edition. And in 4th edition, we just have the 2 variations of the purple worm. We have the purple worm and the elder purple worm. So the purple worm is a level 16 solo soldier, so it's intended to be fought by itself. Has 780 hit points and an armor class of 33. It can swallow its prey, and it takes 10, and any target takes 10 untyped damage and 10 acid damage at the start of the target's turn. Or no, at the start of the purple worm's turn. But then the elder purple worm has an armor class of 41 and 1145 hit points. And then the damage from being swallowed, every round you're inside that at the start of the elder purple worm's turns, swallowed target takes 20 untyped damage and 20 acid damage. And now notice that the exterior armor class is 33. the interior armor class for a swallowed creature is still 26. So it's not an easy thing to hit and deal damage if you're swallowed by this thing. And the Elder Purple Worm has an interior armor class of 34. So yeah, it's still a very, very potent creature. All right, and then in 4th edition we have the Remorhaz. So the Remorhaz, we have just one version of that in 4th edition. That is the level 21 Elite Brute. 480 hit points, armor class 33. It has an immolating carapace, close burst 1, so 5 feet out from it. Reflex 3d10 plus 5 fire damage, and the target takes ongoing 10 fire damage until it ends its turn in a space not adjacent to the Remorhaz. And then Enraged Heat, it deals 10 damage to anyone that is, or its immediate reaction when it's bloodied. So anytime somebody hits it, it can react and try to deal 10 damage. Okay, so swallowing the creature. Swallowed creature deals 30 damage. Takes 10 damage plus 10 fire damage at the start of the Remorhaz's turn. Alright, now in 5th edition, the purple worm is known as a ravenous hunter. Loud noises attract purple worms, which have been known to interrupt underground battles and tear through subterranean cities seeking prey. Underground civilizations in the Drow, Duergar, and Mind Flayers maintain special wards around their settlements to deter these monsters. The most common in the Underdark, purple worms are frequently seen on the surface world in rocky and mountainous lands. It's large enough to swallow a horse whole, and no creature is safe from its hunger. Lunges forward by rhythmically compressing and expanding its body, catching other Underdark dwellers by surprise with the speed of its advance. And then it has an armor class of 18, 247 hit points, can move at 50 feet and burrow at 30 feet through solid rock, and it's a tunneler. So through the earth, it can burrow at 30 feet. Through solid rock, it can burrow at 15 feet, and it leaves a nice 10-foot diameter tunnel in its wake. So if you're ever down exploring underground and DM tells you, hey, you're in a perfectly round tunnel, start to get very worried, because that probably means a purple worm made that tunnel. And if it made that tunnel, you may be in its territory and it may still be alive. So it gets multi-attack, an attack with a bite, and attack with a stinger. The bite deals 3d8 plus 9 piercing damage, and any creature bitten needs to make a DC 19 Dex save or be swallowed. And you take 66 acid damage when you're swallowed at the start of each of the turns. Then the tail stinger is again another plus 14 to attack, and the hit deals 3d6 plus 9 piercing damage, and 12d6 poison damage on a failed saving throw. 12d6 poison damage. This is why, in the DM's guide, when you are looking at the various different poisons that assassins are able to use, one of the most expensive and one of the most potent of those poisons is the purple worm poison. So that's another reason why these things are hunted, is not just because of the potential cachet of precious metals and gemstones that might be in its gullet, but also because if you can harvest the poison glands from that stinger, there's certain kinds of people in certain shady parts of certain cities that will pay big money for that to create purple worm poison for assassins to purchase and use. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and go back to our slides and take a look at how we can use purple worms in encounters. Now again, we focus on 5th edition, so if we want to use a purple worm in an encounter against 5 PCs, for a level 10 or a level 11 party, this will be a hard encounter. Below level 9, it'll be a deadly encounter. When you start to get above level 11, it then becomes lesser of an encounter. So from level 12 through level 14, it becomes a medium encounter. If you want to make it a hard encounter and you're thinking of going with monstrosities, you can add a single Banderhob at level 14 to make that a hard encounter. And then from level 15 to level 19, it becomes an easy encounter. But if you want to make it a hard encounter at level 19, you can add a second purple worm to the encounter. And, maybe you come across maybe you disrupt a pair in the middle of mating. That would be awful. That would be horrible. That might just be the kind of thing that your DM would do to you, though. So you got to watch out for that. So, tactics for fighting against purple worm as players. One piece of advice: fly. Seriously, get off the ground and get far, far, far away. The monster can swallow PCs whole, and without arms, it has a 10-foot reach with both its mouth and its tail, which again, as we've said, carries one of the strongest venoms in the game. And without legs, the purple worm manages to move 50 feet per round across ground and burrows at a speed of 30 feet in combat. So, it's relatively quick, it's very large, and it's very deadly. So, if one of these things shows up, that's why I think in every single party, every single D&D game that I have ever run, as soon as parties get the gold and get to the appropriate level, they start buying things like Boots of Flying. They want to get off the darn ground because there's just too many things on the ground that can cause you a great deal of trouble. Now, of course, you start flying around in the air, you begin to attract attention to yourself, and there's lots of things up in the air that could take advantage of that. But if there's a purple worm on the field of battle, it's probably unlikely there's going to be something as bad as that in the air that you'd have to deal with. So, now if you're the DM and you want to use a purple worm, how would you deploy one of these monsters? Okay, first ask the question, are you really sure you want to use a purple worm? And if this monster bites someone and they fail a dex save, they're swallowed, and now the fight becomes a lot more interesting, especially if the party deals enough damage to cause the monster to flee, and the swallowed PC cannot make the monster spit him or her out. Now in 5th edition, you have to deal 30 points of damage on the inside to make it spit you out. So let's just say that Bob the Barbarian, your normal frontline fighter, he gets swallowed by this thing. And then between the sorcerer and the wizard, they fire off some high-level magic spells that deal enough damage to the purple worm that says, okay, crap, I'm getting out of here. But Bob has been rolling really bad to try to hit inside. And now the purple worm is booking it away. So now you've got to go chase this stupid worm to try to get your buddy Bob the Barbarian out. And who knows where that worm is going to lead you, as it's just desperately trying to get away from what turned out to be a lot more dangerous encounter than it thought it would be. So as a DM, you can really have a lot of fun with this. And you probably would want to plan, if you're going to put the purple worm out there, what are the other things that are nearby? What could you do in case this thing turns tail and runs? And what sort of secondary encounter could that lead to for the party? That might be a really interesting kind of situation. Very interesting scenario. All right, so where would you place these in a campaign? So as a CR15 monster, Purple Worm shouldn't show up in the campaigns until the end of Tier 2 or early Tier 3, and if it's not the only monster in the encounter, it can be used all the way through Tier 4 to great effect. So remember that lore it talked about where it's attracted by battles. An interesting use of Purple Worm is to have it burst from the ground when the party is already engaged with another foe. If you have a campaign that includes epic battles with full armies where the PCs fight as a unit or as commanders of units, throwing a Purple Worm into the battlefield to add to the chaos can be another really interesting wrinkle. So, unless there's a good reason, I would let the dice decide every time the monster attacks which side suffers the wrath of the worm and which individual is getting attacked. Purple worms are not counted as being smart, and they can't be trained. They're not raised as pets by anybody. So, now, of course, your game, your table, you can do what you want. But at least the way I read the lore as written, you wouldn't tend to find a purple worm that would basically be tactical enough that if it is deployed into a battle, it's going to always attack the side that whoever is using it wants it to attack. It just is sort of gonna, food, chomp down over here. Well, maybe that's an orc that you hit. And then, food, chomp down over there. Oh, well, that was the wood elf that you just took out. Food over here, chomp down. That was the ogre that you just bit. It's not going to really be very strategic to say, hey, only attack those guys that are wearing the cool armor that has the symbol of of Bahamut on it, because we're like the evil team of Lolth, and we want to attack all of those fancy schmancy paladins. The worm isn't going to care. It's just going to attack whatever is closest to it. All right. So now if we look at reskinning this monster, I told you that, I hope that I've given you some ideas along the way. We've looked at reskinning this as some kind of elemental thing. Specifically, we talked about how you might reskin it as a thunderworm and make it something in the air. You could just as easily do earth. Purple worm is practically already an earth elemental type of thing. You might just want to change the appearance a little bit of it to make it be an earth elemental. You could sort of take inspiration from the frost worm if you wanted to make it a water creature, and then of course you could take inspiration from the Remorhaz if you wanted to make it a fire creature and have it deal all of that heat damage. So that would be a way of reskinning it. Also, if you wanted to make the Thunderherder a lot more deadly, you could just simply reskin the purple worm as a Thunderherder and not have it be this nice little docile thing, but have it be like this really big, huge, monstrous thing that is going around and it has a potential to swallow and eat people. But in my 5th edition Planeswalking game, when the party went to Innistrad, I was looking at different monsters that I might like to challenge them with. And the Moldgraf Monstrosity was something that I really wanted to use. And if you'll notice here in this image of the card, right here, just above where it says creature insect, that's like a full-grown elk that this thing has wrapped its tendrils around. So if you just imagine the scale of that size, those tendrils are probably 40 or 50 feet long. And this is just a gigantic, enormous worm that lives in swamps in Innistrad. So that's basically where I had it when they were going through a swamp trying to get to a destination they needed to get to. And the party had an incredibly ingenious way of dealing with it. Okay, they have a Daren's Entrance for instant fortress, and of course the barbarian, when the fortress gets attacked by the monstrosity, the barbarian decides to go through the hatch and go onto the roof because it wants to fight. He wants to fight this thing, and he goes over and he takes a couple of whacks at it, and it bites him. And what do you know? It hits. And what do you know? He fails his dex save. So he gets swallowed. Well, now the rest of the party is inside the fortress going, I don't know if I want to go out there. And then they hear the barbarian getting swallowed. And they're like, oh, crap. Now we have to go out and deal with this thing. But the cleric came up with a very good question. And it was one of those questions that made us pause in the session and go look at sage advice, because we couldn't get from the rules as written, we couldn't get a real good sense of how this worked. He said, if I banish this monstrosity to another plane, does a creature inside it get banished along with it? The spell banishment really doesn't specify anything like that. And even when we looked at the sage advice, we couldn't get anything other than, it's the DM's call. So I told the cleric, I said, choose high or low. And I forget what he chose, but when I rolled the percentile dice, he was right. And I said, all right, since you chose correctly, if the banishment works, it's only going to banish the monstrosity, and the barbarian will be left here, which was still kind of a funny thing. So it worked. The thing got banished, and the barbarian was like 30 feet in the air, so it takes some falling damage. But hey, barbarian was happy to take the falling damage instead of getting swallowed whole, or getting sent to another plane still inside this thing. But then they had to decide, well, what are we going to do when the monstrosity comes back? And the druid said, oh, I have an idea for that, because I can polymorph something. And so then the debate was, well, what the hell are we going to polymorph it into? And then after a while, somebody comes up with the idea, well, let's polymorph it into a turtle. Just a garden variety turtle. So they're like, all right. And, when everybody was ready, the cleric releases the banishment, the monstrosity comes back, and then the polymorph goes off, and the stupid monstrosity fails its save against the polymorph, becomes a little turtle. And the barbarian, who's healed up by now, he goes with his flying boots, flies down, picks up the turtle, flies about 5 minutes over to this big wide river that is nearby where they are, and just sets the stupid turtle in the river and lets it start going downstream. And then all the druid had to do is just keep concentration on the polymorph for the next hour. And then somewhere downriver, it turns into this big Monstrosity again, but now it's somebody else's problem. It's not the party's problem anymore. So that's how they dealt with it. I thought that was really good because it and this is why I like to throw things at my party that seem like they are a a greater than deadly challenge for them, is because they work really well together as a team and they come up with these really interesting and ingenious responses to things that I throw at them. So, it's very fun to watch them try to figure out, oh, well, maybe this will work. And of course, rules are like, hey, it's not immune to this stuff, so it's got a chance. And if the dice say it fails the check, then it fails the check. So that was a really fun and interesting way. But if you like me enjoy the lore of both Magic the Gathering and D&D, and you have you sometimes would like to use Magic the Gathering monsters in your D&D game, it can be good to look for large things like this Moldgraf Monstrosity, and you could reskin a purple worm and kind of play around with the stat block a little bit to make it be something equivalent to what this monstrosity does. All right. So let's see. Now, I'm going to go back and double check and see what we have. See if we have any. Oh, stream go boom. Okay. Well, fortunately, it's recorded. So we have that. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go on ahead into the wrap up. If you do have any questions, let me know in the chat, and I will address those after the wrap up. All right, so I have been DM Galabond, and tonight we have been looking at the lore of the Purple Worm throughout the history of D&D. I am here 4 times a week streaming. Monday nights, it's my one mic show, Monster Monday. My other shows, Sunday is that Planeswalking D&D game we talked about in the Walker of Waterdeep, Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Sword Coast Chronicles is our love letter to the published 5e campaigns. We play that Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then on Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, we are here for a romp through Greyhawk with 2nd edition D&D. So it's our Saturday night Greyhawk game. And we stream everything on both Twitch and on YouTube. And if you want to help us out being able to create more content, we do have a Patreon over at patreon.com/DMGalabond. All right, everybody. I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out tonight. I hope you have enjoyed this show, and I hope that we will see you back here for more live streams, and check out some of the content that we have archived over on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe to the YouTube and follow or subscribe over on the Twitch. Like the videos, share the videos, and on YouTube, click that post notification bell. On Twitch, click that notification bell so when we go live, you get notified. And watch social media, DM Galabond, D&D Galabond, Galabond on the various different platforms, and you will be able to find out when we are next going live. All right, everyone, take care. And as always, I'm going to remind you to watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everybody.